Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and welcome to a double video. Now in this video I'm going to show you how to take a time-lapse sequence using your digital SLR camera, and then after that I'm going to jump into Lightroom and combine all of the images that make our time-lapse into a time-lapse video. Right, let's start with the photography. First of all, what is a time-lapse? Well, a time-lapse is a sequence of still images which, when you play them back at 24 frames a second or 30 frames a second, speed up the real world and allow you to see things in a way that you can't with the human eye. To do it, I'm going to take a series of pictures with a set gap in between, and I'm going to go and take one picture every 5 seconds. Now that means in a minute I will take 12 pictures, and in 2 minutes I'll take 24 pictures. So in other words, if I play this back at 24 frames a second, 2 minutes of the real world will become 1 second of video. Now what are you actually going to put in your time lapse? Well, really you want to photograph anything that has movement, but really slow movement. Things like clouds drifting across. Now to me they're barely moving, but if we speed that up in a time lapse we'll see the clouds moving much faster. I'm also on the Norfolk Broads today, so we've got little boats just going up and down the Broads here, which is all very nice and lovely. So we're going to record those and they should be whizzing along like speedboats in the time lapse. So that's the theory. Let's talk about the practical side of things. A couple of pieces of equipment are absolutely vital. Now, in my case, the most essential thing is really a tripod. Good, sturdy, solid tripod, because you just don't want your camera to move at any point during the time-lapse sequence. So my big, heavy Manfrotto tripod is the tool for the job today. Next, well, that is the camera itself. And digital SLR is absolutely fine. You can even do this with some compact cameras as well. Perhaps the next most essential piece of equipment is an intervalometer. Blimey, what's an intervalometer? Well, an intervalometer is simply a posh way of saying a little machine that presses the camera shutter for you. Because I don't want to sit here for the next couple of hours pressing the shutter button once every 5 seconds. It's going to be pretty dull, and it probably won't work as well as if I get the little computer to do it. Now, you might have an intervalometer built into your camera. Check out the menu, see if it's there. My Canon 40D doesn't have one of them, so I'm going to have to do this manually, and I've got this Photix intervalometer, and all it does is press the button once every 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever I set it to do. So that's the basic setup. Let's actually go through the camera setup itself. For my time-lapse to work, I want as little to change from one picture to the next, so I'm going to put everything into manual that I possibly can. So let's do that. Let's start with manual metering, okay, manual exposure. That means I've got to choose an aperture and a shutter speed. So I'm going to go for an aperture of, well, it's on f9. Let's just go with f9, and we'll set the metering, and it says at f9 the correct exposure is 320th of a second. So that's what we'll use. Perfect. ISO, well, I'll put that at 100 and we'll fix that at 100, and I'll also fix the white balance as well, because we don't want that to change from one picture to the next. Another thing that's worth checking and locking down is the focusing, because your camera might suddenly halfway through your time lapse start focusing on something else. I don't want that. I want the focusing to remain fixed. So manual focus, frame up my shot, check it's in focus, and then it's all locked down. Now, of course, I'm shooting in RAW to the core, but I'm not shooting in ordinary RAW today because that would fill up my memory card far too fast. And these pictures, they're not going to be printed. They're going to be turned into an HD high definition video so that I don't need the full 10 million pixels this camera can produce. So I'm going to jump into the menu and put it into its small RAW option. Now that means it drops it down from about 10 million pixels down to about 3.5 by the looks of things, and that's plenty enough for a HD quality video. Okay, so there we go, everything's in place. The metering set, the focusing set, I've framed up my shot. All I need to do now is start my time lapse. So I'll press the start stop button on my intervalometer and we'll let that run through. Here it goes. And it'll start taking pictures. So it'll keep taking one picture every 5 seconds until either the memory card runs out or I actually come and stop it. I could leave this running quite happily, but I think I'm just going to stay here for a little bit and just admire the amazing view of the Norfolk Broads from the top of Norton Marsh Mill, where I'm currently located. What a wonderful place. Well, I really could have stayed watching the boats drift by for hours, but now we're back in the office and it's time to take the photos and turn them into a time-lapse video. And to do that, I'm going to use Lightroom 3. Now, I've already imported the images and we ended up with 817 photos that make up my time-lapse. I put them all in their own little collection, and now I'm going to jump over to the develop setting in Lightroom 3. Now, at the moment, I'm working on one single image, and that's absolutely fine. We've got quite a few to work through, but we've got to start somewhere, so we're going to start with one. Now, because these are all shot in RAW, there's a number of things I can do to enhance the picture, really without losing any quality. But the first thing I always do to any image is ask myself, does it need cropping? And the answer to that one is yes, because this is going to be a video rather than a photo. It needs to be in video proportions. So let's jump over to the crop tool, and on the crop dimensions here where it says original, I'll click on the down arrow, and then halfway down I'm going to find enter custom. And for video, for widescreen, it's 16 by 9. So those are the aspect ratio of a video file. So we'll just click OK, and that's going to crop the image like that. Now, it's also looking slightly wonky. I can see it's kind of rising up a little bit here, and I don't think it did from memory. So whilst I'm on the crop tool, let's get the straighten tool, and we'll just draw the angle out, something like that. I think that's going to look a little bit more, yeah, a little bit more straight. Okay, and we can close the crop tool down. That's it, our image is cropped. Okay, so let's make a few changes with the rest of the image. I can increase the exposure a little bit because they look just a tiny bit dark, and then I can use recovery and bring back as much of that sky as I possibly can, and I think a little bit of fill light just to open up the shadows a wee bit like that. And that's looking slightly flat as an image, so let's just take the contrast and we'll counter that up like that. A couple of other things. Well, colour-wise, we can give the colours a bit of a boost, and we'll take the vibrance up and a little bit of underlying saturation, but it is looking slightly adrift on colour. Even though I went to the trouble of setting a white balance in camera, as it turned out, I think my white balance I chose was slightly wrong. So let's come back up to the white balance. Let's try daylight. Yeah, that just gives it a better tone. That looks, to my eye, on my screen, more realistic to what I remember. Now, we can take this even further. We can use some of Lightroom's more advanced tools, like the graduated filter here. Now, I can get the graduated filter and just drag down, well, let's see, about 1.5 stops, I'm going to guess, a graduated filter from the sky like that. Now, that's looking perhaps a little bit strong and artificial, so maybe where it was earlier, about 1 stop, is perhaps more like it. And I can do the same along the bottom as well, just to put a little bit of darkness in there. Again, not quite as strong as that, just a hint of a darker patch towards the base. And that's going to make the whole thing look a little bit more, yeah, actually that looks a lot better. I like that a lot. And then we can close that down. Okay, so there we go. We've now created the image. It's much improved over the image that came in. Here's the bad news. That's one photo. There are 816 more to go. That's going to take some time, but this is the reason I'm in Lightroom, because I don't have to do 816 of the same. All I have to do is press Control A or Command A on a Mac, and all of my images in the time-lapse sequence become selected. And then at the bottom of the develop pod here, I've got the sync button. Click on sync, click on check all, and then synchronize. And it'll synchronize this one image, our first image. It'll synchronize it right the way down the line on all 817, so they'll all get the same effects, the same white balance, the same graduated filter, the same cropping, and the same everything else. Brilliant. Okay, so that completes the processing part of things. And now we can jump to the slideshow and actually make the video itself. Right, now, there are plenty of options in the slideshow, but have a little look down through the presets here. This is where it starts to get interesting. The Lightroom presets. Unfortunately, you won't find one that says time-lapse video, which is a bit of a shame. Now, you can kind of make a little time-lapse video by going to the playback button and setting the minimum amount of time which is possible in Lightroom, which is 0.1 of a second. and that will make you a video that plays at 10 frames per second. And that's okay, but it's going to look really jerky at 10 frames per second. What we want is 24 frames per second, which is going to look much, much smoother. So how do we get to 24 frames a second? Well, we do it by getting a little user plugin, a user template for free from a wonderful chap called Sean McCormack. He is of Lightroom blog, and he's gone to the trouble of making templates that will let you make time lapses. Now, to bring the template in, first of all go to his website and download it and unzip the file. Then in Lightroom, if you come to the word user template here, right click that, choose import, and go find the folder that you've just downloaded and unzipped, and you'll find video presets, which I don't need, slideshow templates, which I do need, user templates, and you'll find all of these user templates that Sean has shared with the world very generously. The one I'm interested in is the 24 frames per second. So I'll click that, click on import, and now I have a user template of 24 frames per second. Now ignore the fact if you go and check playback that it still says 0.1. Sean is a very clever chap and found a way of working around that. So now all I need to do is click on the export video button, choose a video preset, normally 720p or 1080p, and give this a file name, Time-lapse. There we go, and click save. And then it'll go through and start to turn this sequence of images into a video file. So there you go, there is how you can take your time-lapse photos and then use Lightroom to create your time-lapse video. Now if you want to find out more about me, visit my website at www.gavtrain.com, and I'll see you again here for another video tutorial very soon. I'm Gavin Hoey, thanks for watching.